It's Friday, December 1st. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show. It is a hell of a day, and I mean a hell of a day to talk ball. Could join me to do just that is Jacob Gibbs of CBS. Jacob, we've been talking about doing this for a while now. I've been on your shows before, but I'm excited that you are here with us. How the hell are you doing, man?
I'm great, man. I'm definitely exhausted, feeling the effects of the past several months. It's been a wild season. Yeah. It definitely has been, but I'm like really ready for fantasy playoffs to be here. I'm ready to have some actual space to like breathe and kind of dig into everything from this season in more detail because, man, it really has been nuts, right? It's been a wild year. I actually wanted to ask you off the top if there's somebody you're like really looking forward to charting this offseason, because we've had so many off the wall guys get opportunities. Like I'm really excited for A.T. Perry this week, I think. Like is there anybody that comes to mind right away?
Hey, buddy, that's how you know it's week 13 when you're like, man, A.T. Perry's really getting me going. And perfect week for it, too, because there's all these weird, bye weeks and stuff like that. But, oh, man, it's a great question because, I did get a question in my Discord the other day. Like, hey, so you just started all these rookies. Like, any big takeaways that we could, apply for next draft class? And, I'm like, man, it's just so hard in season, right? Because, like, I'm not even thinking about the next draft class, So, obviously, rookies, I would say really not even anybody from this season. I would say like it's Marvin Harrison Jr. and like the draft prospects that I'm very gassed up to chart. But those guys are always really the ones for me that I'm looking forward to in the offseason.
Johnny Wilson, man. Johnny Wilson's who I'm intrigued by. Guy's nuts. 6'7", insane yard per route run rates. All right, we're gonna get like we can get so far in the weeds with this. We're only in the intro.
No, we really could. But look, there's so many good players and God, I could nerd out for days with all this stuff, but we do have some real official business here to get to, Jacob. It is the week 13 preview. If you've been rocking with us all season long, you know how this goes. We give you the games that you need to binge, stream, and skip. So let's waste no more time and let's get into the binge games here on the Week 13 Viewers Guide, starting with, how could we start anywhere else but with San Francisco 49ers, 2.5 favorites, very controversially, 2.5 favorites going to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles. We got a 47.5 point over-under here. Jacob, look, this is a binge game. This might be one of the bingiest of the binge games all season. There's so many good angles to approach here. I'll just throw it to you, man. Where do you want to take this?
Yeah, I'm extremely excited for this one. I do think we'll see things swing back towards A.J. Brown. This is a great tweet from Graham Barfield over at Fantasy Points Data. So over the last 2 weeks, the Eagles have faced a lot of too high safety coverages. The Chiefs and the Bills use it all the time. Not so much this week against the Niners, only 51% of the time. So I think we see a lot more single high stuff. It's going to swing back towards AJB, which is exciting. I'm curious, like a lot of people are down on DeAndre Swift this week because the 49ers obviously have a tough defense, but they've faced some easy matchups, man. Like I really think there are some metrics that suggest this defense can be beat on the ground. So the Niners ranked 24th in rushing EPA, 21st in rushing success rate, and 21st in missed tackle rate. To me, like this seems like a spot where the Eagles could control the game on the ground. And so like I really like Swift for DFS purposes this week. I think he's going to go a little overlooked because the implied total is down for Philadelphia. I don't know. There are so many angles to go with here.
Yeah, no, that's
San Francisco.
Yeah, that's a really good call out by you, actually, because naturally, I was going to take it to the receiver stuff too. But the Swift factor of it here, it's a great call out again, like I said, because there are, especially before the bye week, there was a couple of games where they really got ran on by some quality rushing teams, did the San Francisco 49ers. They gave up 134 total rushing yards to the damn Bengals. The Bengals don't run on anybody. The Cleveland Browns had 160 rushing yards in the San Francisco game, and that's not exactly like an elite rushing unit without Nick Chubb, right? Or a group of talented backs. So there are some definite indicators there that they can be run on. I think that makes like DeAndre Swift. Look, in a week like this, you're probably starting him in fantasy because, it's like how, with all these guys on bye, do you have great options? But I think there is a way if this game is going to get low scoring, which is totally possible. Like I could see this being an absolute offensive eruption with all of these talented players. But like if the Eagles are going to control this game on the ground, if the 49ers control this game on the ground, it could be like a very, game that's over quickly because there's a lot of rush attempts and some quality defensive play up front too.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. It wouldn't surprise me for it to go under. Another thing I want to bring up on the San Francisco side of things, I heard Hayden Winks of Underdog Fantasy mention that when all three of Debo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle have been healthy for a game together, it's actually been Debo who has the highest expected fantasy point in his model. So I went to True Media and just like dug up the splits when all three have been on the field, and we've seen on 159 dropbacks, 33 targets for Ayuk, 32 for Christian McCaffrey, 30 for Debo Samuel. I was surprised to see him so close to Ayuk because he's getting design rushing work as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then only 23 for Kittle. So 16% target share when all the guys are there. I think just because of the amount of, cover three and single high looks that Philadelphia uses, we could see Ayuk, if this isn't the run heavy game that we talked about, if it gets into more of a shootout, we could say Ayuk just like dominate this game. If Purdy locks in on him, because Purdy has been more aggressive in attacking down the field this year. He's been more successful when he's attacked on the field this year. And so like if this gets into a back and forth game, Ayuk is shredded against single high coverage, which makes sense. There's so many possibilities here and definitely exciting for fantasy.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you had to just like rank these guys, just who's having the bigger game, if you had to pick one to have just the most fantasy points, right? And it's tough because there's really no wrong answer here, like Debo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and because there's so many indicators, like you said, the amount of single high coverage, the fact that the Eagles play the 7th most man coverage according to fantasy points data, like there are a lot of pro Ayuk indicators there, especially because these cornerbacks have been beaten, but just from like a football perspective too, and honestly, like maybe from what I'm about to say, it just becomes a massive George Kittle game despite some of the splits, because if you just think about the spine of the Eagles defense, like linebackers, safeties, those have been, especially linebacker, those have been the areas where they have kind of skimped, and now they've also had injuries as well too. So I can see Debo Samuel over the middle, even if it's a designed rush attempt, stuff like that. I don't know if you had to just pick between those two guys, like, look, there's no wrong answer, but who do you think has the higher fantasy points by the end of the game?
I'm definitely taking Ayuk. For what it's worth, Samuel's target per run rate is down from 30% against two high safeties to 19% against single high. So like if you need a tiebreaker, there it is for me.
Look, I'm very obviously pro Ayuk. Any pro Ayuk propaganda is good with me. I think I go with Ayuk too, but if you have Samuel out there, you can definitely expect like an eruption spot in this game. Just love the way all the receivers set up here. Last thing on the quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts obviously is a monster. He's been incredible. How much stock do you put into like kind of maybe like some mid passing performances outside of the fourth quarter?
Yeah, I don't love this spot for him. So like for the purposes of this game for fantasy, like you're starting Jalen Hurts, but like for DFS, I think you can make lineups that don't include him and build around that angle, because I think it is a tough spot just given the way San Francisco kind of has a lot of their umbrella stuff going. Like the rushing is going to be harder to come by too. I still have him ranked at like QB2 or something, just because the games this week are gross, and this is probably the best one. But yeah, I don't love the spot for him.
Plus, I mean, shoot, he get pushed into he gets his tush pushed into the end zone twice, and like, who cares? It doesn't matter. But I think it's very much like it's one of those games where it could be a statement performance for either quarterback, honestly, right? Like if Brock Purdy comes out here and shreds the Eagles at home, like it's going to be a statement game. If Jalen Hurts, has another massive performance and they win a game against a tough competitor, it doesn't really matter how it looks. He's still going to become more and more the odds-on favorite to be the MVP, whether people out there like it or not. Like, it just is what it is. So, all right, great game. Obviously had to lead the binge category. There's not actually really a ton of analysis to do because it's just like, yeah, all these guys are good. You should play all of them. But this next one here, I think, is a little more interesting. Kansas City Chiefs, 6-point favorites going to Green Bay to take on the Packers, 42.5-point over-under. There were times, Jacob, looking at this one, it was like a couple weeks ago, I don't need to be seeing this on Sunday Night Football, but the way Jordan Love and the Packers offense has played of late, I think it demands respect. It commands our attention, and honestly is a deserved spot here on Sunday Night Football. So put the Chiefs aside for a second. How are you feeling about the way the Packers have played of late and where they stand offensively?
So this is the toughest defense that Love will have faced for over a month, but he has played much, much better. That's backed by data in addition to just like watching him on the field. His off-target rate's been below 10% in 4 of his past 5 games. It was above 10% in his first 6 games to start the season. He's just clearly playing better. I don't know. There's no way to predict what to expect in this spot because Steve Spagnuolo's defense is so aggressive that it like
Mm-hmm.
adds volatility to any matchup. And then when you get the just super green Packers with all these young playmakers, like it could go any way. I will say that when blitz, Love has targeted Jaden Reed more than any player. Even though Reed only plays in 3 receiver sets, so his route total is much lower than like Romeo Dubs. He has the most raw targets when Love has been blitzed. I expected his blitz splits to show somebody who's more aggressive in attacking downfield, because that's basically quarterbacks that you're either going to take one-on-one shots against the blitz down the field, or they're just looking to get rid of the ball quickly. He's kind of fallen into that second group, which surprised me. So we could see AJ Dillon a lot in this game. The Chiefs are struggled against the run if Green Bay's able to control it that way. But if they fall behind, I think Reed is the guy to target. He's played really well. I know you like him. We've talked about him before the season even started. Like Jaden Reed with a lot of 3 receiver sets, probably if they're playing from behind against this defense where there's more one-on-one looks, could put up a huge game.
Yeah, worth noting too that there was some AJ Dillon's back in practice. That's great. Hopefully he's good to go. I mean, the Aaron Jones stuff is just tough at this point of the season, but I love your points about Jaden Reed. I'm a big fan of Jaden Reed. But rookie Dontavian Wicks, another guy I want to talk about here. I don't know that he's going to be a guy that we're like confidently playing at any point in fantasy this year, because he is still their 4th receiver, but he did clear concussion protocol, and like his absence from that Lions game I actually think was pretty critical, because one, he's a pretty good player. Like I actually really like him. I think he's a good player. But secondly, like when he's out of the mix, then it just is really concentrated between Watson, Reed, and Dubs, because they didn't like necessarily boost up Malik Heath or Samari Toure or anything like that. But when he's on the field, like he does command a good bit of volume every single game. Not enough to really, again, be playable, especially in this spot. But if Reed or, Watson comes back down to earth, I think Wicks being out there could be a reason for it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So temporary expectations for Reed. He also has to contend with Trent McDuffie in the slot, who's a really tough coverage assignment. I just love that you are bringing up Dontavian Wicks. Like that is music to my ears. That's the answer I wanted, I think, to my first question to start the show, because he's like such a random guy who pops up all the time when I look at data where I'm like, man, this guy is legit playing really, really well. Yeah. And like when I looked at the blitz targets, he's second on the team, almost as high as Jaden Reed in target per out run rate, because I think Love does trust them because he's been really freaking good. Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's tough to have any predictability with the Packers because the guys who are playing the most are not playing all that well, and also are targeted less often versus the blitz, face a really aggressive press coverage heavy physical Chiefs secondary. Like, yeah, I think Love might put up a good game, but I have no idea who it's going to go to. Reed would be my guess.
I would say of all the guys, I think Reed is the most firm in the circle of trust right now. He's looked great. He's looked really more explosive in the open field, I think, than I might have expected. And he's like a former kick returner, so maybe it's not that crazy to see. Like, and he's done some kick return stuff in the NFL too. So, but that's been an area where I've been more impressed with him. And I still think the route running and the separation really is his calling card. Like, I think he's probably the best route runner on the team, but Wicks is a close second, man. I just wrote him up for the in-season rookie report. He's in there this week. So, he's a guy that it definitely flashes. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if long-term their best 2 receivers are the guys they drafted this year, not last year, even though Christian Watson popped back up, and I think he's a fine boom bust flex play in this matchup where they should have to air it out to keep up with Kansas City. But on Kansas City, obviously there's not, despite the fact it's Patrick Mahomes, there's not a ton we're interested in here. It is pretty much Pacheco, Rashee Rice, and Travis Kelce, and log out.
Yeah, I will say Rashee Rice's role didn't change all that much last week. He just got a lot of the design stuff that had been going to Kadarius Toney and Mecole Hardman. They were both out. I do like this spot for him. The Packers are just inviting you to run the ball, so probably to see a lot of Isaiah Pacheco. But if the Chiefs do have to take to the air, the Packers play a ton of cover 3. They rank 4th with cover 3 rate at 46%. They're 3rd in single high safety rate. And Rashee Rice, I expected to have better splits against 2 high safeties because he's mostly been a zone buster. Pleasant surprise, though, he has dominated against single high, which is a good indicator. It's good when young players are able to beat man coverage and stuff like that. So yeah, when facing single high coverage, 100 routes, Rashee Rice has a 3.26 yard per route run rate, which is the highest on the team, higher than Kelce.
Yeah, no, it's a good note because, I mean, so much of what he's doing is after the catch right now. Like I said yesterday, 70% of his yards in that Raiders game came after the catch, and that's where he's done most of his damage. But if you want to think about it from, again, just like a football perspective, the Packers definitely struggle to tackle. They definitely invite you to run on them. And why can't that just be like an extension of the run game with Rashee Rice? So I think he's firmly like a startable player here this week. Does set up for to be a good Pacheco spot. And obviously Kelsey is always in a good spot as well. All right, this next game and our final game in the binge category. And look, I find it weird that I have one of these teams in the binge category. Denver Broncos at Houston Texans. The Texans are 3.5-point home favorites. It is a 47.5-point over-under, which is pretty spicy. But this is a big time like playoff implication game. Whoever wins this game goes over 50%. The loser goes down to 25%. Like, it is a big time potential playoff swinger here between Broncos Texans. So first of all, before we get into any like players fantasy stuff, I'm just curious, Jacob, from your perspective, which of these teams do you trust more as like a fringe playoff contender?
Oh man, that's tough. I trust, I guess, the Broncos, because I really don't know. I don't know if I believe in Houston's defense. They've played really well, but they really haven't had a lot of tough tests. They're kind of like San Fran, which is ironic, I guess, but like a lot of the advanced data on their defense, particularly against the rush, doesn't suggest that they're as good as they played. And I don't know if I trust the offense either. But yeah, I think that they'll win this game. I want to answer the Texans to that. I was shocked how high the over-under was in this game.
Me too, because I mean, shoot, Russ puts up like 150 passing yards and they win the game. And that obviously implies that their defense has played well, and their defense has played well of late. You can run on them. So that might lead you to Devin Singletary a little bit here, but they've been pretty good from just a passing game perspective. But you want to talk about Singletary. Go for it.
Well, yeah, I just want to say that he played 81% of the snaps last week, and he didn't see very many rushing opportunities, but I think that makes sense. They've talked about kind of wanting to limit his workload, and then they played Jacksonville, who is not a team to run on. They have a 64% opponent pass rate. The Broncos' opponent pass rate is 55%. Obviously, we know they're a team to attack on the ground. So, like, if the snap rate from last week holds up and Dameon Pierce just really isn't a part of the game plan, which I hate. I love Dameon Pierce, but he has really struggled with his own rushing scheme. Scott Barrett has detailed this over Fantasy Points data. He's much, much better in man gap concepts, and that's not the type of rushing they do anymore. So they might legitimately just go to Singletary. I think he's a really intriguing like DFS play, because I think people will kind of be off of him after last week. And huge total here and favorites. Yeah, I mean, it seems obvious because it's the Broncos, but I also like nobody wants to play Singletary. And as soon as he has a bad game, it's like, yeah, I knew it, like
100%. By the way, just a little prediction here on Dameon Pierce. We will be talking about Dameon Pierce again at some point in his career. It's probably not the rest of this year, but he is good. I think he is definitely a context back. Like you said, the scheme stuff, it really is critical here. I would just wish they hadn't played him like every single snap in the preseason, because I wouldn't have like drafted him in as many spots as I did, and it's ended up being a terrible pick. But same. Hey, that's the preseason though, right? It's like they're trying, and it's like, okay, we're not getting the results we want, so we're just going to go ahead and play the vet. But it is practice. It is practice. Although the Tank Dell stuff was definitely real, as producer Colin notes in the chat. So that was a good indicator there. So on those receivers, Tank Dell looks like he got back at practice today in a limited fashion, but our guy Nico is still out there. Tank is balling. How do you see these receivers fitting in this week?
It's a tough matchup for receivers, no way around it. Broncos have played much, much better. Patrick Surtain is obviously a stud. As a result of like the impressive cornerback play, the Broncos have the third highest opponent running back target rate and fourth highest opponent tight end target rate, because teams just avoid these corners. So like I don't know if we'll see that necessarily, because I think Stroud's pretty aggressive, and I could see him wanting to just test his guys down the field. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if we see a ton of Dalton Schultz in this spot.
Yeah, who missed Thursday practice with a hamstring, but if he gets out there, I think he is in a smash spot for sure. I don't know if I'm going down to Brevin Jordan afterwards. You might have to be pretty desperate at the tight end spot, but yeah, look, I think could it end up even being like a little bit of a Robert Woods game? If he's out there as the slot receiver, I don't know. I don't think you have to start Robert Woods in fantasy, but I just think that is something to keep in mind. Man, it's going to be tough for me to take these receivers out of like starting lineups if regardless of the matchup at this point.
No, I'm not taking them out. And for what it's worth, Robert Woods, you'll find his name at the top of most, regression lists. Which might just be because he's bad, but if there's ever a spot, this is a good one for him.
On the Broncos here, real quick, before we get to the stream category, they're a really funny team because they're on such a hot streak right now from a win perspective. Cortland Sutton's posting the Russell Wilson apology for him on his Instagram story, the whole thing. But I mean, Sutton's really the only guy you're really thinking about playing in fantasy at this point, or is there anyone else that you want to highlight here?
Yeah, so I don't love this spot for Sutton. Derek Stingley, Houston's third overall pick in 2022, has missed most of the year, but he's back. And so he hasn't covered a ton of routes, but among 111 players with 150 or more routes covered, he's first in targets per snap. So teams don't throw at him. And so I think he'll spend a lot of time on Sutton. The Texans have been a team to attack with the slot. And so if Jerry Jeudy is able to suit up, he's probably the guy who takes advantage of this matchup. But yeah, I do think we could see Devontae Williams bounce back here. So in spite of a league low yards per running back rush average in terms of like yards per attempt, they're at the very bottom. Texans are the only team with a higher missed tackle rate on running back rush attempts than the Texans is the Broncos. Sorry, I butchered that. So the Texans are missing a ton of tackles. They just really haven't faced any good rushers like Travis Etienne, Zach Moss, Bijan Robinson are really like the top guys that they faced. And Moss and Robinson both, played all right. So I could see it being a Javonte spot, especially if they do get the lead early, if Houston makes mistakes offensively and just get a ton of volume for Javonte here.
I like that. Again, it would be great if we had somebody dependable on this team besides Cortland Sutton. But I like the Jerry Jeudy note as a potential, I mean, he's been so down bad lately, and
I wasn't so tough to trust. Yeah,
I wasn't in on Jeudy to start this year, but like he can't go the entire season without having literally almost no good games. So I think this is a pretty good spot to think about Jerry Jeudy. But all right, with that, let's move into the stream category here, starting with what could have been a great Monday Night Football game, but it's probably not going to be so great. Although the Jags are so weird, they might make it interesting here. But it's Bengals going to Jacksonville to take on the Jaguars. The Jags are 8.5-point home favorites. It's a measly 38.5 over under. Jags are interesting to talk about. Bengals, maybe not so much. The Bengals ran 41 plays last week, Jacob. I mean, 41 plays. And honestly, I'm concerned that that's just going to be how it is going forward.
Yeah, I don't have anything on the Bengals. I think we could see Joe Mixon get a lot of targets. Jacksonville plays a lot of zone and have seen some running backs targeted against them, but they're not a team to run on. It's tough to really want to use any of these guys. Is there anything that stands out for Jamar from a matchup perspective to you?
No, I mean, you're going to be in that Garrett Wilson zone where, okay, you tell me he gets 80 yards before you tell me he gets 70 yards before the game. It's okay, I'll take that. I'll don't let me unwrap the mystery box. Just give me the 70 yards and I'll take it. He had to catch a deflected pass and run after the catch just to get where he was last week. So yeah, the Jags have definitely been beatable down the field. They've definitely been beatable from a cornerback perspective. Like you mentioned earlier, they will sit up there and not let you run on them. So there is that if you want to get excited about Jamar Chase or T. Higgins if he plays, but it's pretty rough out there with Jake Browning. And then on the other side of it too, their defense, speaking of rough, the Bengals defense has been very rough of late, especially down that spine, down the middle. So what does that do for our guy Calvin Ridley, who's popped up of late, and Christian Kirk, who's still a very good player?
Yeah, Kirk has been great this year. This is a great spot, I think, for Ridley and for Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence has the worst quarterback rating in the league when blitzed, which I don't know what to do with that. That could just be a small sample size thing. I didn't look and see if it extended beyond this year, but he's been terrible when blitzed this year. The Bengals do not blitz very often, and they also use a ton of single high safety coverages, which is good news for Ridley particularly. Ridley has a 27% target per route run rate, which leads the team, and 2.44 yards per route run against single high. When we've seen more two high safeties, that's been kind of the time to target Christian Kirk. So I think this matchup sets up really well for them. And then we could see Travis Etienne rush, with better efficiency for sure, because the Bengals have been susceptible to big plays. But I don't know. I just don't trust the running game there really.
I'm with you. I don't trust the run game, but I do think this is a nice little bounce back spot for Travis Etienne just from the matchup perspective. If they're able to, control this game at home. I mean, they're a heavy home favorite. You typically want to use the running back that you can literally see get 20 carries because he got 20 carries last week, even though he wasn't efficient. And he came off the field with injuries last week too. So I think it's a nice bounce back spot for Travis Etienne, but love your notes about Ridley. Like, there was so much scrutiny about the Ridley stuff at large points of the season, and it was very frustrating, but I really feel confident with the way they're using him right now. They're using him off the line. They're getting him in condensed formations. Like they're moving him away from press coverage a little bit. Were one of the first people I saw highlighting some of the issues with press coverage. Not that like he's the stone worst receiver against press, I think from like a technique perspective, but it just makes his life a lot easier and allows his route running to shine when he's off the line there. The way that they're using him there, I think he's going to finish the season really strong. So he could be a guy that like was super frustrating at points this year, but ends up becoming, like I said, a guy that helps you finish strong.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great spot for him. I think we saw last week, like when he's faced so many matchups against teams where they really take away perimeter receivers, and they've got weapons. They've got Evan Ingram. They've got Christian Kirk. They don't need to, fixate on Ridley at any point. But when they've been in more neutral matchups like this one is, like last week's was, they've really, and then also there's the Zay Jones splits. If you think that if there's any real causation behind the correlation there, but Ridley has clearly played significantly better when Zay Jones has been on the field.
Yeah, I think there's like a tiny bit of sense there, but I definitely don't know that, Zay Jones is like whispering in Ridley's ear, like, here's what you got to do here to really get this thing going. So it's a fascinating little kind of thing to talk about. And I think will be one of these things by the end of the season. He'll end up having like a nice stat line and we'll all forget like the crazy rocky journey that it took to get there. But I understand why people, like I have said on this show, I understand why people are frustrated with the Ridley thing, but I think is a good start in this game. All right, let's move on to the next one here. Miami Dolphins, 9.5-point road favorites going to Washington to take on the Commanders, who are sort of kind of floundering at this point. 49.5 over under. Jacob, look, it's obvious. You're going to start all your Dolphins main passing game players against this secondary. I think that's pretty easy to say, but any other spot in this game that you want to highlight?
I think just through raw volume, you've got to feel decent about starting the Washington guys. Like I'm starting Curtis Samuel in a few spots this week. I worry a little bit though that Sam Howell might implode. But like even last week, he played terrible, I felt like, and still was able to produce 300 receiving yards. It's so spread out that it's going to be rough predicting which receivers are going to hit that. But some players are going to be valuable within that framework. And then I don't know, we can add stats to contextualize like just how great of a matchup this is for Miami through the air, but like it's the best. It's the best.
You shouldn't need us to. You should not need us to. You should know by now at this point, like smash receivers against the Commanders.
I do have a good one. Their pressure rate is way down since they've made those trades and got rid of Montez Sweat.
Could have seen that coming.
Right. It's at 24%. So the lowest in the league is 30%. It's 24%.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Curtis Samuel, who leads the team in targets per route run among all these receivers, 0.22 targets per route run. Like, Samuel's a good player, man. That's not totally surprising me. I'm kind of curious where he plays. He's a guy I'm curious where he plays next year because I think he's a good player, target earner, gets consistent separation. And I don't know what this team looks like next year. I don't think Eric Bieniemy's back. I don't know that they're just going to moonwalk into having Sam Howell as a clear-cut starter, but I'm really fascinated like what this team looks like next year. And at this point, I've kind of lost interest in it down the stretch. Even though, look, Sam Howell, I've given him some flack for some of the stuff on the show this year, but I mean, he is at least exciting from like a backup quarterback perspective. He's another one, like I said to Dalton yesterday, I want to see him in an offense like with Tampa Bay, with Mike Evans, where it's like you just need one guy to throw to. I mean, they have Chris Godwin, I get that, but like one guy to throw to, just pump that guy with volume. I think he could like take a player like that to the moon. Yeah,
I think so too. I wish that we could get more like focused volume for Terry. Like I felt like that was the perfect pairing there.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame that we got to get targets to like the third string tight end and, the backup running back and all kinds of stuff there. But all right, before I get too sad about that, let's move on to the next one here. Detroit Lions, 4.5-point road favorites going to New Orleans to take on the Saints, 46.5-point over under. Lions obviously have struggled the last couple of weeks, or at least Jared Goff has struggled the last couple of weeks. How do you feel about their offense going into New Orleans to take on the Saints, which, by the way, I mean, the Saints and their fans just hate. I mean, the Saints fans hate Derek Carr at this point. It is crazy. I know I talked about it yesterday on the show in passing, but I was looking up more Derek Carr stuff today. I'm like, man, they hate that guy at least on Saints Twitter. I don't know about every Saints fan, but on Saints Twitter, they're sick of Derek Carr already.
Yeah, me too.
Me too. Hey, buddy, same. I was sick of Derek Carr about week 4, so right. I get it where they're coming from.
So, yeah, the Saints defense is super aggressive. Ton of press coverage. Going to get a ton of pressure on the quarterback as well. They have the 4th lowest opponent out wide target rate, and they've seen a ton of targets funneled to the slot. So Amon-Ra St. Brown obviously is the guy. It's really like, I just want to know how impressive this defense has been. They have an opponent passer rating of 25.6 on passes that have traveled 15 or more air yards. Only the Ravens are even close. No other team is below 60. The Ravens are at 21.8. So like they're in the same category as the Ravens, which to me have been just like impenetrable, like just insane defensively. But no Marshawn Lattimore for this spot. So like I think this is actually kind of a sneaky spot where Amon could put up like a big game. And then the other note is the Saints haven't faced a lot of like threatening pass catching tight ends, but they still rank 8th in opponent inline target rate at the tight end position. And so like just week 10, we saw TJ Hawkinson get 15 targets, 134 yards against these guys. Sam Laporta is kind of taken a back seat with all the offensive pieces healthy, but I think this is a spot where he could put up a big game as well.
No, it's a good call out. And Cam Jordan might miss this game. Pete Werner might miss this game. There are definitely some defensive pieces that are in question for the Saints. Dennis Allen's a great defensive coordinator, an awesome defensive coach. I love the way the Saints defense plays. I just think he's been a little over his head in terms of being a head coach, which is no surprise. He was a little over his head as a head coach with the Raiders. So there is that. But yeah, I do think this is it's not just a layup spot for Jared Goff to get right, but it is inside. I do think Amon-Ra is like, if he's a pound the overs type of guy this week, I think he could be set up for a massive game. And of course, at this point, start those running backs. If there's no Chris Olave in this game, let's just live in a very sad world where he's not going to play. Rashid Shaheed sounds like that's a significant injury. What do you think that does to the Saints offense?
I think it's going to be a lot of Alvin Kamara. But I do think that there's a chance if the Saints if the Lions get a big, that we could see A.T. Perry make splash plays down the field. I don't know if Carr will actually throw to him. He's been targeted at a really low rate. But without these guys, he's the kind of receiver who I think can beat this defense. Detroit's been beat down the field a lot. They have the 5th most opponent deep targets, 15 or more air yards per game, and they have the 10th highest opponent passer rating on deep passes. The more likely answer is we're probably going to see a lot of, Taysom Hill and stuff, right? Like they're just going to manufacture offense whatever way that they can. Juwan Johnson, I think, is a good name to bring up here if you need somebody tight end this week. But yeah, I think Perry is the guy people don't know much about and like don't know if they can trust yet. But like he played really well at Wake Forest. He played really well this preseason. His collegiate per route data is all like insane. I think that's somewhat inflated by the offense that he played in. Did you look at him pre-draft?
Yeah, I did. I like A.T. Perry. I was surprised he fell to the 6th round. He's like to me, seems like a good quality NFL X receiver. He's very much in like that Devontae Parker bucket. Wake Forest definitely was kind of a Looney Tunes adjacent, maybe just a straight up Looney Tunes offense there, similar to the Tennessee stuff, but in different ways. So I think A.T. Perry is a good player, and it's no surprise that when Jameis got in there, he's like, yeah, I'm throwing A.T. Perry down the field. But this is very much like a stoppable force, movable object type of game, right? Because you mentioned all the deep target stuff that Detroit is giving up, and just Derek Carr, like last week, he started to kind of get it going with Chris Olave on those intermediate routes that I thought, like, man, that's where he kind of made some money with Devontae Adams last year, and then it just took forever for him and Chris Olave to get on the same page. But it was happening last week in the first half. If Carr has that level of confidence, I don't know if he's gonna have that level of confidence as A.T. Perry, but I mean, shoot, I would love to see it because I do think he's a pretty quality like deep sleeper.
Yeah, I think if he connects on a couple plays early, or if they just get where they're needing to attack down the field, like I don't know who else it's going to be. It wouldn't surprise me if he locks in on him. We've seen Carr do that at times, right? Like if he has a guy that he trusts down the field.
Yeah, definitely. So Man, it's a good like deep bye week play. I do like the idea of it here. So yeah, let's hope we get some A.T. Perry love, because man, I am still stunned he fell to the 6th round. Not that I thought he was like a great player or anything, but I thought he was like a perfectly viable 3rd round pick, and he goes 3 rounds later than that. So and I like a little bit of what we saw again in that Vikings game with Jameis. So let's see some more A.T. Perry. This next game here, this seems a little ugly on paper, but I think if you look a little deeper, there's a lot of appeal, and why it's in the stream category for me. Arizona Cardinals at Pittsburgh Steelers. Steelers are 5.5-point favorites. It's at home. Of course they are. 41.5-point over under. The Cardinals, we'll start with them, Jacob. The Cardinals have been throwing the ball a lot. They've been playing very pass heavy offense with Kyler Murray back there, which isn't totally surprising, but how do you think they set up going into Pittsburgh against a defense that's always going to give you some trouble?
Yeah, so I just tweeted this out today. And anytime you tweet coverage stats, you have to like take it with a grain of salt, because there's so much context involved with who the defender has been covering, what quarterbacks they've been facing, all that good stuff. Mm-hmm. But Joey Porter Jr., 1st round pick for the Steelers, has the lowest opponent completion percentage allowed as the primary coverage defender among 62 qualified corners. His target per coverage snap rate is right between Sauce Gardner and Marshawn Lattimore. They didn't start him at the beginning of the year when they were giving up all those big games to wide receivers. But recently he's really come on strong, and they haven't been giving up, such big games. So that could just be who they're playing. So yeah, this defense has been one to attack down the field. I don't know. It's been tough for Marquise Brown, man. But we did finally see his target share was up this past week. And I do think that partially has to do with the types of coverages that he's been facing. The first 2 games back with Kyler Murray, they played a lot of too high safety coverages defensively, and Marquise, that's just not a good setup for perimeter receivers. That's more of the, Trey McBride type of defense to attack. And that's what we saw. And so it's really, this is a volatile game as well. So if Kyler's playing well and he connects with Marquise Brown down the field, then I think this could turn into kind of a back and forth game, because I think Pittsburgh is set up really well in this spot.
Yeah, Marquise Brown going against and the Joey Porter stuff, I think is pretty legit. I think he's a pretty good player. And he's like a big physical perimeter corner. That does make me nervous with Marquise Brown, because he really does struggle with press coverage. I think that's been an issue for him throughout his career. So if they just have him line up and press the hell out of Marquise Brown, that could definitely be pretty problematic for him, even if some of the schematic stuff is good from a single high perspective and everything. But that makes me nervous. But I don't know. These other receivers at this point, if Trey McBride, who's a little banged up, doesn't get out there, that would be even worse. But these other receivers at this point, with no Michael Wilson, it's just these guys are not viable big time target players like Greg Dortch and Rondale Moore, stuff like that. So I go back and forth on what to do with Marquise Brown, and I feel like he's going to be a tough player in lineups this week. But you brought up the Steelers. I so agree with you, man. The Steelers are in a great spot here, starting with the running backs. I mean, they are 2nd in the NFL in rushing yards since their bye week. They have been, crushing it as a rushing team. I think Najee and Jaylen Warren are both quality starts this week.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, since Broderick Jones has played more, the Steelers have been completely dominating in terms of yards before contact and all that good stuff. And we just saw Arizona get completely destroyed by Kyren Williams. And then I love the matchup through the air as well. The Steelers and Kenny Pickett were more willing to push the ball over the middle of the field last week in the first game without Matt Canada. That might have just been a 1-game thing, but I also think it has to do a lot with the type of coverage that they're facing, which was, again, one of these, middle of the field open. You can find all this stuff on Fantasy Points Stat. It's awesome. I can't wait to dig into that stuff more this offseason and test it and everything. But when the middle of the field is open, that's a great spot for Pat Freiermuth, of course. And George Pickens sees his target rate go way down against these types of coverage looks. And so Arizona uses these a ton. The Cardinals really are just a hands-off defense. They're super, super soft. They don't pressure you. They don't blitz you. They don't use press coverage. They just drop into a lot of kind of umbrella zones and see if you can beat them with methodical drives. And I think the Pittsburgh might. If last week is any indication, if they're willing to lean on Pat Freiermuth over the middle, then I think it's going to be pretty easy to move the ball through him. Obviously, Deontay will be involved. And then I think the running backs are going to get whatever they want. Man, Najee Harris leads the league in runs of 15 plus yards. I saw it on Twitter. Is that real? What is happening?
Yeah. I was told he couldn't do that. They're 4th as a team, again, since week 7, their bye week, which Broderick Jones getting in there definitely helped too. But since they just kind of committed to this ground game attack, they're fourth in both carries to go for 5+ yards and 10+ yards. And like you said, Najee Harris is at the top of the leaderboard. I really think, man, getting Jaylen Warren in there to lighten the load on Najee, I like a lot of that stuff. Like when these guys are just getting, we talk about with Ekeler all the time, but like when these guys are just getting pounded like every single week, and they're having to carry like the ball a ton of times, and they're getting messed up in the pass game. Like shoot, again, to bring it back to Ekeler, like we talk about it all the time, like narrative wise, like, these passing down backs, maybe they can last longer because they're not taking hits. And then you see Ekeler get drilled by Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith at the same time.
How's Austin doing, man? I'm worried about him. And he's got New England this week, and they're going to take away Keenan Allen. It's just going to be like 30 touches. Austin just getting pounded over and over. Like,
yeah, we'll get to it. That's going to be a tough spot. But yeah, man, it's just, again, when you can get these guys splitting touches almost basically 50-50 between Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris, I think that's been so good for Najee from like an explosive run perspective.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love both these guys. I think they're both top 24 options this week. Another, just like one last note on Pat Freiermuth, when Pittsburgh's quarterback has not been pressured, Pat Freiermuth is second on the team with a 26% target per route run rate, just behind Deontay Johnson at 29%. I think like every matchup based note for Pat Freiermuth is like, yes, this week.
Yeah, and I think his start to the season was pretty fluky too. He's a good player, man.
I think so. He only had a 66% route participation last week. It was the second game back from injury. So like if he's still being eased in, or they do any annoying stuff like that, that could ruin the parade. But everything else is just like green light.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, you say they want you to beat them with methodical drives, do the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, Pat Freiermuth, Deontay Johnson in the short to intermediate areas and like run game stuff, that sounds like they can beat him with some methodical drives. So I am really interested in the Steelers offense in the second game of the post Matt Canada era. I'm also weirdly interested in this game because I find myself just endlessly fascinated with the Colts, even though not like that enthused with how Gardner Minshew is trying to seemingly tries to throw the game away at least twice every single game, but love the way Shane Steichen is drawing things up for the Colts, who are 1.5 point 1.5 point road favorites going into Tennessee to take on the Titans. 42.5 point over under. I mean, look, Jacob, am I just excited about the Colts because I'm a big Michael Pittman guy and I'm a big Josh Downs fan? But I mean, is that the only reason, or is there more things to be excited about here with the Colts beyond obviously Zach Moss now getting like on the fantasy rocket ship?
Yeah, I think it's mostly biased because this Colts team is freaking awesome, man. Josh Downs is insanely cool.
It's fun. They're fun.
Yeah, what Zach Moss is doing is really cool. I mean, quick reminder, Zach Moss put up 195 yards and 2 touchdowns against this Titans run defense when we thought that no one could run on the Titans. And right when JT was back, and Zach Moss just was like, yeah, guys, I'm the man. I love this team. I will say that like the over-under is still only 42.5 points. It's been bet up throughout the week. It opened at 40.5. But it's still pretty low. I don't see anything that stands out for Zach Moss other than usage. Where do you have him? Because I think Hayden Winks had him at RB2 on his like running back ranking show, and I'm like, man, I might be way too low on Moss because I looked at it just from like a objective projection standpoint, and he didn't come out anywhere like near that. But I could see him dominating this spot.
I mean, I think it's tough to think there are 10 running backs I'd rather have this week, but
I think I've got him way too low.
He just is set up extremely well. I mean, Shane Steichen has said that they're going to just turn back to him for all, which, maybe some of that is not truth. I don't know, but he's played well for them and has kind of earned that opportunity.
Right. Yeah. I think it might be really inefficient in a game where they only have a few scoring opportunities, but I could be wrong. I want to be bullish on the Colts. I do think that the Colts should be able to move the ball through the air if Gardner plays better. The highest opponent first read target rate belongs to the Tennessee Titans, which means teams are just able to find their first read really often against this defense. They also have the second highest opponent out wide target rate. So perimeter receivers, particularly against this defense, should dominate. Michael Pittman is the guy. He's got the 8th highest first read target rate on the year. He was the first read on all 13 of his targets last week. Like the offense just funnels through him. And also like Josh Downs is just so good that I think he could, even though the matchup is more, leaning towards Pittman, he could go off at any point. Like he had almost as many targets, 12 targets last week as Pittman. we're all aboard the Josh Downs fan club here. Like we all get it. It could be
100%. Yeah, Pittman's been awesome this year. He's like been the engine of that offense. You know, the consistent like start to finish engine of that offense because JT hasn't been out there. I love the first read target set that you mentioned, but Downs did get like involved. I think concentrating that offense between those two guys is really smart. It's also really efficient because these guys are both separators. I mean, especially Downs is just been, to me, one of the best separators in the NFL when he's healthy this year. But Pittman obviously is great too. So I think if you got Downs, you can play him this week. And obviously Pittman has like been a must start every single week. So and that does trickle down to Gardner Minshew, who, like I said, does seem to try to throw the game away like at least twice per game, but is a quality, competent quarterback, and has also, for you mentioned the Zach Moss stuff, he has been a little bit of like an annoying goal line vulture because he's just been they have a lot of RPOs there. He'll scramble in a touchdown down the goal line. So if you need a quarterback streamer this week, you got Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, whatever. I do think Gardner's a quality option.
Or if you're really feeling the Colts passing game, I think they're a great leverage play for DFS because, like, obviously everybody's going to be on Zach Moss at his price tags, but like they're cheap too. And if the touchdowns happen to come through the air, you're going to be at a huge advantage to the field.
I was about to move us on, but we haven't talked about the Titans at all. So
I know. Yeah.
What do you say?
I think there's some interesting angles here. I don't, who knows with the Titans, it might not matter, but like the Colts are 31st in blitz rate, only 19% of the time. Will Levis has been much better when he's not been blitzed. The other thing is by far the best game for DeAndre Hopkins this year came against the Colts in week 5. Tannehill only threw for 264 scoreless yards, but 140 of those went to Hopkins. He's facing a cover 3 defense here. The Colts use cover 3 at the highest rate in the NFL, 55%. And Hopkins is only one of 5 receivers with a target per route run rate above 30% when facing cover 3. Obviously, per route gets inflated in Tennessee just because of the way their offense operates. But like he's clearly been the guy against this type of coverage scheme. The other thing, I think that you actually kind of can run on this Colts defense. Derrick Henry really struggled against them the first time, but like we're in December now, like it's maybe a little bit different than early October. I could see a big Henry game here too. Like I think there are ways where they could move the ball and this game could go over.
All right, let's move on to the final game here in the stream category. Cleveland Browns, 3.5 point favorites going to LA to take on the Rams, 39.5 point total here. Is it Joe Flacco time? Jacob Gibbs. is the year 2023, and we're going to be watching a Cleveland Browns game with freaking Joe Flacco suited up. Is that where we are at this point of the season?
That's why I just started giggling immediately. It's because you're like, let's move on. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Why are we talking about the Titans so much? And then it's like,
let's move it right on to Joe Flacco.
Like, we're week 13 right now, man. Yeah, I honestly am kind of tempted by the idea of building DFS game stacks around Joe Flacco, which is, that's just where we're at. He's 4,600 on DraftKings. The Browns are extremely cheap across the board. Kyron Williams is definitely too cheap as well on DraftKings. So like you can easily stack up like Flacco, Williams, Nacua if you want. It sounds disgusting, but like I wouldn't be surprised if he is able to move the chains and like actually get a decent amount of offensive volume in this game. And if that happens, like Jerome Ford is kind of interesting as well. He ran 35 routes, drew 7 targets last week, 75% route participation. That was by far his highest career mark. Kareem Hunt's questionable. So we could see like bell cow work for him. And, Flacco is obviously well known for like taking easy dump off targets.
Oh yeah. Jerome Ford is catching 5+ passes if old buddy Joe Flacco starts. Book it right now. Like with the routes run last week, with the targets last week, and just again Joe Flacco playing, like yeah, for sure he is getting those checkdowns.
Do you have the stat off the top about Cooper Kupp? I saw you tweet about it was from Fantasy Points Data about his scheme touches. Yes.
Yeah, I got it right over here. So it just the last 3 years, his terms of designed targets. 12.3% of his targets were designed plays in 2021, 23.7% in 2022, and then this year so far it's 4.2. So it's way down. And his slot rate went up last week. Like, it's just tough, man. It's good for the Rams because they have Puka, and he's at 19% in terms of design play targets this year. Like he has been a guy they're willing to go out of their way to get the ball since week 5. Like he's been they've been willing to get him design plays and not willing to get Cooper Kupp design plays. And I think it makes a lot of sense, right, Jacob? Because this is a guy that they want to conserve his body. And I just think at this point, like, Puka is clearly the most valuable receiver on the team.
I think that makes sense, yeah.
Obviously, they also have Kyron Williams, who they can get involved in the passing game as well.
Yeah, so the reason I asked you about Kupp is because, I noticed that his slot rate went way up last week and they used him more around the line of scrimmage. I didn't know if you had any like week specific design stuff on him, but like if he's used more in the slot going forward, then I think, especially in this matchup, Puka Nacua might play really well. If he's outside more, Cleveland might be without Denzel Ward again. And they use a lot of press and man coverage, and Nacua has done well against those. The Browns also, I think, have by far the highest single high safety rate. And Puka has done really well against that too. So I think Nacua is kind of a sneaky guy here. I know it's been frustrating lately. The real problem, though, is just like the pressure. If the Browns are so impressive defensively. They're second in pressure rate, 45%. Their lowest single game rate is 37%. So the league average is 36%. Cleveland hasn't dropped below that once in 11 games, which is nuts. And then, like, obviously the Rams are not great at pass blocking, and Matthew Stafford is not great against pressure. He's completed only 42% of his passes when pressured. That ranks 29th among 32 qualifiers. Also has the third highest off-target rate versus pressure. So
yeah, is Myles Garrett. Like, how healthy is he going to be in this game too? I mean, I'm just looking at a headline here. Myles Garrett uses Pilates and yoga to play better and avoid injury. But is that going to be? Hey, shout out to Pilates and yoga. I got my yoga in this morning. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, shout out. But like, is that going to be enough for him to get involved in this game? Shoot. I mean, also, by the way, we're talking about Joe Flacco. Like, Joe Flacco at this point in his career getting chased down by Aaron Donald. Like, there's a lot of potential for like front line. Yeah, right. I mean, 39.5 point total. We could even see fewer than that just because like there are big boy defensive players in this game that could wreck this thing. Which, hey, if that is the case, Jacob, all the more reason to put this one in the background on your Sunday ticket. Put it up on the small screen, maybe mute and keep the Eagles and 49ers game on the main screen. The NFL did us a favor, by the way, with that schedule.
Yeah, for sure. Finally.
I love your notes about Puka. I think Puka is indeed like in a smash spot here. I feel really, really good about him.
I love to hear that. I do worry about the pressure stuff, just like too many negative plays and the offense just falling apart. But I do think from a matchup standpoint, it makes sense.
All right, let's move into the skip category here, and we can pick up the pace here to finish this one off. We got three very skippy games here, starting with, the Chargers are in the skip category, and you know what? I mean it, man. Not just because they're playing the Patriots, because they are going to New England to play the Patriots, a 40.5 point over-under. I mean, the Chargers is road favorites, 5.5 points. I don't know about that. That doesn't make me feel good with the vibes around the Chargers right now. You mentioned Ekeler. He is definitely feeling it, feeling the season so far. And, you heard him. If you listen to this show, you heard him on the show, what he had to say this week. So, it's just tough for this offense right now. You mentioned like the Ravens tried to take away Keenan Allen. They even said during the game they were doubling him. He still catches 14 passes, and the team they score 10 points. Like that's where they're at right now.
Yeah. So the Patriots have the second lowest opponent first read target rate. Only the Jets are lower, but like Baltimore's is really low as well. I think it's definitely possible that Keenan just is good enough that they can scheme things to him. But this is a really aggressive man press cover heavy defense that's going to do everything they can to stop him. So I think we're probably just going to see a lot of inefficient touches for Ekeler. Hopefully he breaks them. I don't trust Quentin Johnson or Jalen Guyton at all. They've been invisible out there.
No, not at all. And I will say on the Patriots side, I'm curious your thoughts about Rondé Stevenson. We talked about him a little bit yesterday, but Demario Douglas missed practice again today. But if he suits up and he plays in this one, he's in a really good spot against a bad pass defense and just looks really good out there, I think, as well. So he'd be the only one I'd be interested beyond Ramondre, who has bounced back of late.
Yeah, I like Demario a lot. If he's in there, I think that makes sense. I don't know what to expect from Bailey Zappi. I will say on Stevenson, there are a lot of encouraging data points. Even though the Patriots are completely falling apart, he's really picked it up. 78% snap rate week 12 is a season high for him. He has a 14% target share in 6 straight games. He only topped that once in his first 5 games. Wow. His yards after contact per rush was below 2.2 in each of his first 6 games. And since then, he has 5 straight games with a rate of 2.7 or higher. And then his avoided tackle rate is up from 13% in his first 6 games to 22% in his 5 most recent games. He's been playing much, much better. But also playing better is the Chargers' run defense. They've been a tackle through the air all year, but they have been pretty good against the run. We did see David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs combined for 193 yards and 3 scores against them. We did, but I don't think the New England rushing offense is nearly as good as Detroit's. But yeah, I think all the usage-based stuff is good, and Ramondre himself is playing a lot better. And I think at the very least, he's going to have such a high floor from the targets that he's just a slam dunk on a pretty questionable week for fantasy.
That is definitely how I feel too. I think he is in a good, solid spot here. All right, let's move on to the next game. Atlanta Falcons, 1.5-point favorites going to New York to take on the Jets. 34-point over/under here. I mean, oh my God, bro. The Jets, what a slog right now. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers is getting his flowers in at this point because he got activated. I mean, we're probably getting another Tim Boyle game here, right? So, what else is needed to be said?
Yeah, I don't have anything. At least, he did center the offense around Garrett Wilson, which is great. So if
sounds like Alan Lazard is about to be activated again, though. So, good job. You'll be able to play the receiver you gave $44 million to.
Wild stuff. No, I don't have anything on the Jets. Hopefully we see a lot of targets for Breece Hall here. The Falcons are really good at taking away the wide receiver 1 and the first read. And so we could see Garrett Wilson just kind of, although Garrett Wilson's so good against press coverage, I don't think it matters really.
Yeah. Falcons side of things here, man. I mean, we got the offense concentrated down to Bijan Robinson and Drake London, which is all we really care about. I mean, Tyler Algier and Cordero Patterson got in theirs, but I'm from a passing volume perspective, it was Bijan, it was Drake London. That was about it. Obviously, Bijan, when he's getting this level of workload, is a top 5 fantasy back on the board, even in a tough spot here. But Drake London, what's your level of concern with him going against this Jets defense?
10 out of 10. New York's opponent out wide target rate is 32%. That's easily the lowest. Their first read target rate is only 59.5%. The next lowest we said earlier is the Patriots at 66%. It just doesn't happen for top receivers and teams don't even test them. I think Drake London's tough to trust any week. Why would we expect him to get volume here? I think it's going to be a lot of Jonnu Smith, right? It's going to be a lot of that kind of stuff. Hopefully a lot of targets for Bijan Robinson. But even that, I don't trust his route participation spiked in week 10. And then they had the bye and it's kind of back to what it was before, 58% in week 12. I don't know, man. I don't like talking about the Falcons.
Me neither. This is 34-point over/under. Give me the under. Give me the under on that one, baby. All right, last game here. Carolina Panthers. Oh boy, Carolina. Talk about the Panthers. Not a fun team to talk about. Going to Tampa Bay to take on the Bucks. 5.5-point home favorites are the Bucks. 36.5-point over/under. Jacob Gibbs, is there any reason to watch this game at all other than to see Mike Evans dunk on the Panthers? I would say no.
I think that this game could be watchable. I think there's a chance.
Okay. Sell me.
I think there's a chance that this is maybe the best Bryce Young game that we get, honestly. It could be bad, but
low bar, but
the Bucks blitz at the third highest rate, and Bryce has actually been better when blitz than when not. And I think it makes sense. The problem for this offense is not an inability to find open route runners on Bryce's part. It's just that there aren't any open route runners to be found at all. And so a blitz is actually, I think, a good thing for Carolina's offense because it increases the chance of Thielen or Mingo finding a one-on-one matchup they can actually win. If defenses just sit back and let Carolina's offense try to create wins, it's not going to happen. But in this spot, I think it could. We've seen a lot of quarterbacks take advantage of this secondary down the field. And Tampa Bay could be missing Jamil Dean again. He missed last week, hasn't practiced yet this week. Levante David could be out as well. The rates are much, much better for Adam Thielen and Jonathan Mingo, their per route data, when the team has been blitzed. I think there's a lot of things that signal it could be a spot where the Panthers move the ball through the air. And then, if they do, if Tampa Bay is asked to actually stay aggressive throughout the game, then I think Mike Evans could put up a crazy game, 200 yards or something. I don't think this Panthers secondary is nearly as good as the numbers might suggest. I think that they're just by far the easiest defense to attack on the ground. So nobody is even trying to throw deep against them.
Here's how you make this game watchable based on everything you just said. You go and find yourself Mike Evans over 64.5 receiving yards and a Adam Thielen over, not yards, just 5.5 catches. Take the over on those two. You parlay those things together, throw a few bucks at it. Maybe this is watchable. Maybe you keep it again on the corner of one of your TVs while you're mostly focused on Niners, Eagles in the afternoon. That's how you make this game watchable. Because I'm with you. The blitz stuff is really good for Bryce Young. Just getting it out quickly, less like sitting there hopping around on his toes, scanning the field, trying to find open receivers that absolutely aren't going to be there. Like the Bears did a great job of just, all right, we're going to rush and we're just going to drop back. And when you do that, I mean, they're in play man coverage. I mean, it was, but put the roof over them too, because they're not burning them. Or come down. They're not burning you deep. That's not going to happen. So I like combining those two there. And just last point here, Rachaad White, I think obviously is in a great spot, but that's really again about it here.
Yeah, Rachaad White's the obvious one here. And I will say, like, if the Bucs do build an early lead, Tampa Bay has a 43% pass rate when playing with a lead. Only the Jets have a lower rate. So we could see, White get another 100-yard game here. Could just absolutely get fed if they've got an early lead and Bryce Young struggles against the blitz, makes mistakes, and they get into an early hole.
All right. Well, if you think the Bucs are just going to smash the Panthers, you take that Mike Evans prop and you turn it into a Rachaad White prop or something like that. Okay, that's how. Again, we are trying to make this game watchable here for the people. But all right, Jacob, we did it. We previewed every Week 13 game. It's a messy slate out there for people, but I think after listening to you, they will have a much easier time assembling their Week 13 lineups. Tell the people where they can find all the great work that you're doing right now out there, man.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at JAGibbs_23. My work is on sportsline.com. And then I do a podcast with Fantasy Football Today each Monday, Beyond the Box Score. Check that out as well. And yeah, man, this has been a blast. It's been as fun as I think it can be for breaking down this Week 13 slate, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, we talked Joe Flacco, Dontavian Wicks,
A.T. Perry,
A.T. Perry, all the big name players that we know and love in the NFL. We talked about him here on the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show. That's what we do here. But for now, that's going to do it for us today on this episode. Be sure to tune in first thing Monday morning to hear Scott Pianowski and I break down all the action from this very interesting Week 13 slate. Until then, we are out.